Hello and welcome to In Conversation with the Doctoral College. I'm Deborah Curiton, I'm the Research Development Manager at the University of Wolverhampton.
And I'm Dr Ben Halligan, I'm Director of the Doctoral College.
We wanted to do a vlog which was about chairing a PhD and the role of the chair. We wanted to talk about some of the some tips really about how to be a good chair. So as the Doctoral College at Wolverhampton, we're often the people who step into chair when we've had to change a chair at the last minute due to illness or whatever. So we have a lot of experience of chairing doctoral vivas. So Ben, what would you say is really important when you're chairing? What tips would you give to the new chair?
Well, a chair is really the central person in the PhD viva. They are coordinating the nature of the event itself. So they're slightly like an umpire, but at the same time, they're also representing their institution. And you have at least one external examiner coming in. That person may not necessarily know the ins and outs of the regulations. The chair may or may not know, but the chair at least would perhaps know where to look or who to talk to, or have a copy of the relevant regulations with them.
So at Wolverhampton, when you're nominated as a chair, you will have gone through training with myself, and then we add you to, with your permission, we add you to the chair's list. So when you're nominated as the chair, you'll get an email from the STAR office, and the STAR office will send you through the relevant documentation. One of those documentation is the research regulations. The research regulations change slightly from time to time, and so do we have an examiner's handbook, and so does the examiner's handbook will change from time to time. So it's always a good idea to have a read through those documents to make sure that your understanding is the most up-to-date understanding. And if you've got any concerns or questions, you can either approach myself or Ben or Jill Morgan, who's the policy officer in the Doctoral College.
I think one difference across a number of universities is where the chair is from.
Yeah.
And in some institutions, the chair will be from a totally different discipline.
Yeah.
So you'll have someone from the arts, humanities, chairing a hard science PhD. I mean, the advantage of this is that they will be entirely impartial. I mean, they shouldn't be saying stuff like, yes, I thought chapter 2 was poor as well. They should really be step back. So that's an advantage. I guess a disadvantage is that it's quite boring. Often, I've chaired a number of vivas that have gone on for hours. I remember one about shooting sound waves through sand that was very wet or not so wet, and the best will in the world, that's not of interest to me. So,
see, I think it's really interesting to hear about somebody else's research and from a different discipline. It's through chairing vivas in different discipline areas that I know that sand from a particular, or soil from a particular riverbank in Africa has the same constituency of dirt that you can find somewhere in Shropshire. And I didn't know that, and I didn't. That's really interesting. That's mind blowing as far as I'm concerned. How does that happen?
So maybe there is some advantage from wider intellectual.
And I think it's an opportunity to hear about research that you're never ever going to hear about under other conditions. Because as much as we would love to sit and listen to all our doctoral students talk about their work, we're never really going to have that space in our calendar to do it. So that for me, this is an opportunity to hear about some of the work that the students are doing.
I mean, so other institutions will use a chair very much from the same discipline, thinking that this chair will actually understand the ins and outs of what's being said and may offer a kind of more appropriate moderation. So it's different across different universities. But generally what will happen is the chair will ensure that the room is set up, will meet the examiners for some sort of pre-viva discussion. And at that point, I think any questions around policy, around regulations, is the thesis too big? Is this how the bibliography should be laid out? Can be aired and answered.
Yeah.
Ideally, the chair should encourage the examiners to come up with a kind of plan of action. So who will ask what and when?
Yeah.
And then moving forward how they envisage the viva to occur. And probably as well, they'll ask what the anticipated outcome seems to be at this point, or whether there are questions that need a serious answer, which if it isn't given will affect the particular outcome. So some sort of organisational control of the way the viva should proceed will occur.
Yeah.
And that will be the pre-viva meeting.
In the pre-viva meetings at Wolverhampton, we asked that question about how long do you anticipate the viva being. We try not to have vivas any longer than 2.5 hours, because you do see the student start to really flag after about 2.5 hours, and really you're not going to get much out of a student beyond that. If they're tired, they're not going to be giving the best answers. So it is about, not necessarily the examiner's not necessarily asking every question that they want to ask, but asking what the most important questions that they want to ask. And as a chair, being able to encourage examiners to look at the difference between the questions. That's a question that would be nice to be asked. It's a nice conversation that we could have, could be developmental for the student, or that question is critical to the publication of this work. So therefore, the critical questions are those that are the most important ones to be asked, and then there is time to then go and ask the nice questions, the developmental, the flowery questions, or the conversational questions. I think it's really important for a chair to be able to help the examiners distinguish between the two.
Yeah, I think so. I think you mentioned as well this thing of a student flagging beyond a couple of hours. I've said that the chair is sort of the umpire, is the representative of the institution, is also a kind of janitor in a way. The chairs here that we need, is there some water for the student, is the window open or closed, is the computer working, and so on. But I think crucially the chair is there really for the student. The student's welfare has to be foremost in the mind of the chair.
Yeah.
And for a student, it goes without saying, this is a major life event.
Yeah.
And a student will be often terribly nervous. And I think no matter what the chair does, the student's going to be nervous. Those nerves will fade. Yeah. When I've chaired, I've found the student, I've given them a bit of a pep talk, and I've said, crucially, if you need a break, let me know as chair, I will call a break. Yeah. If you feel you're being talked over, let me know, I will ensure that you're not being talked over. Yeah. If questions are unfair and inappropriate, I'm here for you, I'm here to control the discussion as it occurs. Yeah. Sometimes a chair will sit in the corner, disengage somewhat with what's going on, and will leave the student at the mercy of the examiners. That's not good chairing at all. I think as well, sometimes as chair, you should impose a break. If you've had an hour and a bit, you've got to the end of the discussion of, the literature review, stick a 5-minute comfort break in, because it can clear the air.
Yeah.
It can actually move things forward quite smartly in a way that examiners tend to go further into nuances, but then wouldn't after a break. Yeah. So I think the chair has to really consider the students' well-being and ensure the students in a fair situation to perform to the best of their abilities. I think timekeeping is really important as well, so that at the end of the viva, when the student is asked to leave, not to just let the poor student wait outside indefinitely, but to get a sense from the examiners how long they're going to need, 10 minutes, half an hour, to go out and to say, it looks like it will be half an hour, but let me come and get you. Where shall I come and get you? Can I have your phone number? So to make sure that this person is still in a kind of more comfortable place when waiting for the examiners. Beyond that, I think there can often be some confusions in the communication of the outcome.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that if the outcome can be major corrections, resubmission, it will often be kind of covered in a lot of positive response. It's great work. It really is good. It will get a PhD, but you do need to do this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And beyond this, the student can be terribly confused as to actually what the outcome is. So one thing we've done here at the University of Wolverhampton is a piece of paper with outcomes and a box that's ticked and signatures and a date. And we give that to the student after the Viva so that they know an hour, 2 hours, a week later, they've actually got proof that it was a pass with minor corrections, or it was awarded, or it was a resubmission. Because otherwise they can really get quite confused around all these categories. So I think that for the chair as well, when the student's back in the room, to say, this is where we're at with the process. That is, the examiners have discussed what they think.
Yes.
I will ask them to tell you now what the outcome is, or I will tell you what the outcome is. They will talk a little bit, and then to say to the candidate, okay, so we've got the outcome, which is this. You'll be receiving some feedback in the post. Thank you very much, and you're now free to leave, and there'll be a round of shaking of hands and that kind of thing. These sort of niceties are very important in structuring and ending correctly the Viva, because you really don't want a student to have a negative experience, even if the work was deemed not particularly high standard. They have to come out with a sense of, I got creative feedback, it was critical, it was constructive, I know what to do, I think positive thoughts about my examiners, I might disagree with them, but I know where they're coming from. And I think it's the chair's role to do that. If the student exits alienated and upset and unhappy and doesn't quite understand what happened and why, that could add months and months onto the process beyond the Viva.
Yeah.
And the chair really has to ensure that the best possible atmosphere is achieved.
Yeah.
So they're also, in a way, as well as umpire, as well as janitor, as well as having pastoral care for the student as well, they're also kind of like the person who's organising the party or organising the social event. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's quite a big role then, because you're there as a representative actually of the Vice-Chancellor of the university. You're there welcoming visitors to the university on behalf of the Vice-Chancellor, and it's really important to give a really good give somebody a really good opinion of
good impression,
good impression of the university itself. I think it's really important that chairs make sure that they offer to meet examiners at the train station. I mean, it's okay for us at Wolverhampton because we're literally 2 minutes away from the train station. We can pop down there and fetch people, or make sure that people know where to get a taxi and what the taxi number is, and that you'll meet them at main reception when they arrive, and take them to the room. There's nothing worse than either an examiner wandering around campus trying to find a room in a building that they don't really know. So it's really important to give that good face of the university to externals.
When I've been an external examiner, I've really welcomed a strong chair.
Yes.
Who will say in the post-Viva discussion, you had some issues with literature review, okay, we've dealt with that, we've established this and that needs to be done. Let's now move on to, you know what I mean? Because sometimes there can be tensions between the external examiner and the internal examiner as well.
Yeah.
They can disagree, and you may need the chair to guide that conversation to a logical point. I mean, in highly unusual circumstances, which I've never encountered myself, if you have an absolute disagreement with an internal and external examiners, the chair is essential in terms of moving things forward, which would be perhaps to another Viva with a new set of examiners. But this is highly unusual. I've never encountered it myself.
I think that there are ways as a chair of being able to kind of almost cordon people into not necessarily a decision, but a band of decisions. So if it's obvious that this isn't a pass out right, you can say, well, okay, it's obvious this isn't a pass out right, but it's obvious that it isn't a fail. Is that right? So that means that you now have 2 or 3 choices. So that might be a resubmission or minor modifications, or if you have major modifications, there would be 3. And then try and get them to kind of focus on the options and discuss those. So I think you can kind of gently kind of take some of that debate out, so immediately out of the discussion, by some gentle shepherding, really.
And most universities will have very clear pros around what minor modifications is, what resubmission is. And I think that when you come across stuff like learning outcomes for undergraduate modules, it can be a bit generic. And, you know. But in terms of making this key decision that would take another big chunk out of somebody's life, I think the chair should really be guiding the examiners to the specifics of the regulations and the pros and the description and things like that. Also, you know, if you are an external examiner, a number of universities, they may have different outcomes. Some have a 6-month correction period, some don't, you know, and so you can't necessarily expect the examiners, even the internal examiner, to know the ins and outs of the particular regulations. So the chair is also connecting the examiners to the regulations and making sure that's quality assured situation as well.
Okay. So, what's your top tip for the new doctoral chair?
I think this is someone who has to ensure the experience for the candidate first and foremost, and that must be done through a control of the event, ensuring that regulations are adhered to, and ensuring that everybody, the examiners and the candidate, is given space to have a good hearing, a good discussion in terms of the Viva itself.
Yeah, and also ensuring that they're very well acquainted with the research regulations and the handbooks that we share with examiners, so that they know where to go to and where to guide people to look.
Exactly.
Okay. So thank you very much for listening. Do watch out for further vlogs from the Doctoral College, and if you like to hear more from us, please do subscribe.